Heartbeat Alaska is brought to you in part by Coca-Cola.
By the generous support of the Alaska Native Health Board.
Heartbeat Alaska is also brought to you in part by the Public Information Office of the North Slope Borough.
Welcome to Heartbeat Alaska. I'm Jeannie Green, bringing you Native news across the North. Thank you for joining me. Topping off our Native news, Heartbeat Alaska is expanding once again. Beginning with this program, we will be aired in Arizona over Navajo Nation TV Channel 5 out of Window Rock, Arizona. TV5 reaches several large communities and smaller communities in Arizona. And as you may or may not know, the Navajo Nation is the largest Indian nation in the United States. We welcome them as viewers in our continuing efforts to share news from across the North and across the nation.
Coming up, students from the North Slope Borough help fish and game biologists study caribou herds.
It isn't just a problem.
Cookie Rose talks about sexual abuse in the Alaska Native Health Board interview. Plus some highlights from AFN Convention 93.
We turn now to Gary Fife and National Native News.
This is National Native News. I'm Gary Fife. A new health clinic is going to be built for a Washington tribe that has suffered a horrendous infant mortality rate. $250,000 has been appropriated by Congress to construct a health facility for the Shoalwater Bay tribe, whose reservation lies on the coast of Washington. The tribe has had half of its infants die in the last 5 years on the reservation, and no cause has yet been identified. The tribe took their case to Congress, and a compromise bill produced the $250,000 approved. Tribal Chairman Herbert Whitish credits Congressman Norm Dix for his role in securing the funding. Shoalwater Bay tribal officials say a health clinic on the Tokeland Reservation is the best way to improve the health of mothers and babies. The Internal Revenue Service sees a lot of applications for tax breaks each year, but one of the more unusual deductions would have to be from Alaska Eskimo whaling captains who want to take charitable deductions for the cost of outfitting their crews and having their catch feed entire villages. The IRS has disallowed those deductions in the past, but Alaska Senators Ted Stevens and Frank Murkowski are pushing a bill to have the IRS recognize the cultural tradition of sharing the whales. The estimated annual deductions would range between $2,500 and $5,000 per captain. In recent years, settlements of major land claims for Canadian natives have found them sitting on top of huge parcels of land and enormous bank accounts. That's not being overlooked by the Canadian banking industry, reports the Wall Street Journal. In fact, one of them, the Bank of Montreal, has set up a special Aboriginal banking unit and branches on reserves in 4 places. This week, the bank has signed a loan agreement with the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation worth nearly 88 million Canadian dollars. The Canadian government has already promised to pay some 2 billion Canadian dollars to settle current native land claims. Some expect that figure to reach 6 billion, and that Canadian tribes will control a third of that nation's land mass. The famed Medicine Wheel site in Wyoming has been at the center of controversy between Native spiritual activists, environmentalists, and the U.S. Forest Service. Natives and their supporters are trying to protect the Wyoming site and make sure that natives there for spiritual reasons are not bothered by visitors. The wheel is 80 feet across with rocks laid out in a spoke pattern. Tribes of the Northern Plains have long used the site as a place for spiritual quests. The U.S. Forest Service now reports that some temporary schemes appear to be working at the site in the Bighorn National Forest. The federal agency has banned vehicles from any closer than 1.5 miles, and that's cut tourist traffic by half. They add those who make the walk make less disturbance to the natives, the wildlife, and the vegetation. Two native groups continue to push for more stringent measures to be put in place permanently. A new report out of Washington, D.C. says that about half the tribes in the nation are not happy with the way local school districts use federal money intended for Native American students. The National Indian Policy Center has issued a new study that examines the use of $250 million in federal impact aid, money given to schools to teach Native students. Impact aid money is used to offset tax revenues not available because of reservation lands nearby. The study says 27 of 59 tribes questioned answered that they were dissatisfied that the school district officials failed to consult with them about how the money is spent. But the report includes both tribes and school districts for being negligent in meeting their respective responsibilities. And finally, Marquette University in Wisconsin has announced it will drop its Warriors team name by the end of the academic year out of respect for Native Americans. The school's athletic director says the process for a new name will be open to the students, alumni, and the public.
Gary, in one of the stories that you mentioned, I think it was Wyoming, I may be wrong, it talked about the medicine wheel. Now, to inform me and my viewers, what is a medicine wheel?
The medicine wheel is an 80-foot structure. It is laid out on the ground and it resembles a wagon wheel. It is made up of rocks that have been placed in a round shape, like a hoop. And the spokes, about 8 or 10 of them, radiate out from the center. And it's been long revered as a holy place by the tribes of the Northern Plains.
So do you know how long it's been there, for hundreds of years? Or?
I would say thousands of years that the site has not had any real final archaeological process there because the natives actually don't want that to happen. It's a holy place for them, and they think maybe the scientists would interfere with it by moving things. But they have always held a place in high respect and revered it. So it's been around for, I'd say, 500, 600,000 years. No one really knows, except, of course, the powers above us. And the controversy is about protection for that site, because many of our neighbors now are interested in native religions and inadvertently intrude on the spiritual quest that people take. They might want to go there for prayer or meditation and get away, but with some tourist standing down the hill blazing away with an icon, it kind of interrupts the spiritual reason of being there.
So today they still go there and perform ceremonies?
Yes, they do. They've actually worked out some schemes with the U.S. Park Service to limit outside access, and so natives will have a chance to go there and be undisturbed as they make their prayers and put down their offerings and go through their ceremonies.
Thanks, Gary. We'll be back with more news from Heartbeat Alaska right after these messages.
Vince, remember how we got our jobs telling people to buckle up?
Yeah, it seems just like yesterday.
Buckle up, baby, buckle up.
Next.
To buckle or not to buckle?
Next.
The band.
Next.
We are never going to find a safety belt spokesperson.
Let's get buckled!
Yeah, we've helped save thousands of lives.
But some people still don't buckle up. So let's hit it!
You could learn a lot from a dummy. Buckle your safety belt.
Fire can turn any room in your house into a death trap. Make sure your family knows 2 ways out of every room. Plan ahead for fire.
This message was brought to you by the Yukon-Kuskokwim Health Corporation as part of the National Community Volunteer Fire Safety Project.
And now for news from the North Slope Borough. Students from the North Slope Borough and the Kotzebue area have been helping area biologists study the movement of caribou herds. Elise Patkotak has the story.
Drop some junior high school students and wildlife managers into the midst of a herd of migrating caribou, and you have a recipe for adventure, as well as a valuable learning experience.
The project centers around the western Arctic caribou herd, and it spends the summer on the North Slope, and then in the fall it It migrates down the northwestern side of Alaska, down past Kotzebue, and it crosses the Kobuk River as part of this migration. And Jim Dow, the area biologist out of Kotzebue, has been including students from the villages in that region in this collaring project. This year I asked the North Slope Borough School District if they'd be interested in getting some students from here involved, and they agreed to send some North Slope Borough students down to Kotzebue and to Ambler so that we could involve them in this radio collaring project.
Biologists have found that capturing and collaring caribou in the river is less stressful than other methods. Data from transmitters on the collars are picked up by satellites and will be used to determine critical habitat areas, calving and feeding areas, and other information that will be used to better manage and protect the caribou herds.
We went to Kobuk, the Kobuk River, down in Portage, we went boating, collared caribou.
The best part I like is grabbing the caribou in the boat and collaring them.
Jonah Simmonds and Vernon Edwardsen of Barrow were two of the 5 North Slope students who quickly became expert at catching caribou from moving boats.
We got in a boat and we waited till the caribou were like halfway across the river because like they could touch the ground and they could start kicking lots.
Jumping around. They're helpless when they can't touch the ground underwater.
I just like reach over and grab the antlers.
Pull the caribou over closer to the boat, and if it's really kicking, just keep on holding on to it until somebody grabs the tail. And then when they have the tail, the other boat comes with the calf and goes together like this, and then the calf is on the side and the mother's in between the 2 boats. We had to bleed it, get blood samples from it, and put the collar on and just let it go. We did.
It was fun.
Exciting. The big bulls, whenever they fight in the fall, they get puffed up on their neck. That's why we don't put collars on the bulls and on the males, only on the cows.
The Onion Portage area is rich in fish and berries. The group harvested 1 caribou for their camp meat during their stay.
North Slope students did real well. They jumped right in there like it was a whale butchering or something, and 4 of them went to work on it and had it gutted and skinned and cut up into quarters real quick. You know, they did a real good job. I was real impressed that, you know, basically 7th and 8th graders could handle a animal that well.
Back in Barrow, Carroll works with science classes to plot satellite data from collared caribou and create maps of the herd's movements.
The main motivation is hopefully inspire some of these kids to maybe go into wildlife management as a career. Wildlife are one of the most important resources on the North Slope, and it's real important that we get some people trained to be in the position of managing and making sure that these wildlife populations are well taken care of, and making sure that there's going to be wildlife up here in the future for people to use and enjoy.
Do the students have any advice for others who may follow in their footsteps?
Tell them to be careful and don't be scared of the caribou.
Hang on tight.
For Heartbeat Alaska and the North Slope Borough, I'm Elise Patkotak.
Other students who worked on the project were Nels Amat and Bubba Long of Barrow and Mr. Walter Watkins of Newicksik. And we want to thank Mr. Geoff Carroll, who shot the video. Thank you, students, for your excellent work. We move on now to Ann Walker and the Alaska Native Health Board interview.
Today we're talking with Cookie Rose, who has worked in the field of substance abuse and sexual abuse in Native communities for many years. Cookie, tell us a little bit about your experience working in these fields.
I started out about a little over 10 years ago, and I was working in Bethel at the time. I'm originally from Fairbanks. I'm Athabascan, and when I moved there, I started working for Tundra Women's Coalition, and I started out as a bookkeeper, and I started to realize that instead of just recording the problems, that I wanted to be part of the solution. So I started getting involved in doing counseling and doing presentations on sexual abuse and on alcohol. I had to start dealing with my own issues. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and deal with other issues that I think that affect a lot of families, battering, sexual abuse, as well as alcohol abuse. And then I worked for a sexual abuse project for over a year and a half. And then about 4.5 years ago, I moved to Anchorage, and I started working for Rural CAP, primarily in the field of community development. And so my focus has changed from individual problems to looking at problems in a more global area.
Yeah, I know your first experience was working in the field of sexual abuse, was dealing mostly with women and children. And then later on you began doing presentations to men in the prison setting. Perhaps you could share with us a little bit of your perspective on sexual abuse, how it's evolved over the years based on these different experiences.
Well, when I was first working with the Tundra Women's Coalition in Bethel, it's a program that's funded by the Department of Public Safety, and there are a number of programs all over the state, and a lot of the directors and people involved are involved in the network on domestic violence and sexual abuse, and the focus is primarily on women and children. But after I started listening to men in prison and in alcohol treatment programs, I started to understand that it wasn't just a problem that needed to be focused on women and children, but also on men. And so it's really everyone's problem. It isn't just one person is the perpetrator or one person is the victim. We all are victims of this problem because it affects all of us, whether we're affected directly or whether we're perpetrators.
This is a problem that most people find very difficult to talk about, and we all know that too many of our people suffer deep emotional scars because of sexual abuse. What do you think needs to happen to create healthy communities where sexual abuse is not doesn't happen?
I believe that this is a problem that's very complicated because there are no easy answers for this. I think, first of all, people need to educate themselves, and I've thought a lot about this because a lot of problems stem from sexual abuse, and it isn't just a problem for the victim, it's a problem for everyone. And so as individuals, we need to take responsibility, we need to educate ourselves and take responsibility for our own behaviors and how we may be supporting things that we really are problems in our families. In families, we need to take responsibility. If we know of these kind of things going on, we need to start talking about it. And in communities, we need to take responsibility. This isn't just a Native problem, it's everybody's problem. It affects every community as far as I've ever heard.
Cookie, if someone in our viewing audience wants to talk about sexual abuse, who can they talk to, or who can they call?
Well, it's real important not to keep these things inside of yourself, so it's real good to talk to a friend, talk to somebody you trust, somebody in the school or a health aide or somebody in the hospital. If you're close to a domestic violence program like Bethel or Nome or Kotzebue, talk to somebody in one of those programs, or you can call an 800 number at STAR and they can refer you to somebody maybe or talk to you there.
Thanks, Cookie. Today we've been talking with Cookie Rose, who has worked in the field of substance abuse and sexual abuse in Native communities for many years. For Heartbeat Alaska and Alaska Native Health Board, I'm Ann Walker.
Once again, I'd love to welcome our new viewers in Navajo country from Arizona. Broadcast from Navajo Nation TV, Channel 5. It's great to have you with us. We move now on to the AFN 93. There were some things that happened during the convention that maybe you didn't get a chance to see, such as a trade fair and the Tundra Times banquet.
I don't know how we can help you. Are you a wrestler?
State Senator Georgiana Lincoln and Native leader Kenneth Blatchford emceed the Tundra Times banquet for 1993. Over 1,000 people attended the banquet, which is held as a fundraiser for the Tundra Times newspaper. The audience was treated to all Native entertainment, featuring Charlie Hill, the American Indian Oneida comedian, and Mark Hoover, a Cordova-born musician. Christina Gloria Gagnon wowed the audience and opened the banquet with her rendition a cappella of Amazing Grace. The Athabascan Fiddlers set the mood as people were seated for a dinner of prime rib. Can't speak for anyone else, but I sure enjoyed the dinner. The evening's program was packed, including an auction to benefit the Tundra Times, which is beginning its 4th decade of service to Alaska Natives. During the evening, an example of this service was the announcement of the Tundra Times Alaska Native Journalism Fellowship Program, which will be providing scholarships and training opportunities for Alaska Natives majoring in journalism. Heading on down the escalator to the lower level, you'll find another favorite of the annual convention, the Trade Fair. The Trade Fair Native Style, where artists and craftspeople meet to sell their beautiful work. This is one event that I normally never miss. In fact, this is the first year I missed it in 10 years. I was on crutches, but you can be assured next year I'll be there with all the rest of the shoppers, checking out the art, the jewelry, the native clothes, all gathered in one place. In addition to purchasing finished items, many natives use this opportunity to buy the supplies they need to make their beautiful handiwork. Most of the arts and crafts come from the villagers themselves, though, from the natural materials surrounding those villages, and that's what makes this art fair so special. And that's what makes the AFN convention so special. Thousands of natives from across the state gathered together on the convention floor to do business. We share our different cultures and dances, teaching one another about each other. And one thing we find in common, we all love to laugh.
If you have news or information from your village or community, please call Heartbeat Alaska, area code 907-563-3507, or fax 907-563-7079.
Every year, most of us leave the AFN convention with fond memories. I was able to attend for a brief time. I was on crutches, and I'd like to apologize to the good people that called me and wanted to meet me, and I wasn't able to do so. Specifically, Grace from Shaktoolik. Thank you very much for the invitations, and I'll make it up to you next year. We travel now to Barrow. Elise Patkotak wears a different hat this time. She reported a story earlier, and this time she talks about a holiday coming up. Well, sort of a holiday.
Trick-or-treating in the Arctic takes some special skills since it's already pretty cold here by now. You can't exactly send your daughter out dressed as Snow White. If you do, you're apt to get a real Snow White back, except the white will be frostbite and the snow will be cold and wet. Boys don't have it quite so bad since they seem to be content to dress as Ninja Turtles, a costume that can easily be made to fit over the standard trick-or-treat outfit. In the Arctic, that outfit consists of snowsuits, parkies, boots, and heavy gloves, over which a costume is somehow made to fit. It's hard to fit a little girl into all those clothes and then make a princess outfit look appropriate. especially if the gown involves a lot of crinoline. If you try to put the outfit underneath the clothes, you end up killing the whole concept of a costume unless your child gets undressed at each house. If they're not at a relative's house, their complete disrobing may not be greeted with a lot of joy, especially if they are the 99th child dripping and stripping in someone's doorway while all the heat in the home escapes to warm the Arctic night. One way we solve the dilemma here in Barrow is to bring the kids to the apartment complexes. You send them in while holding their warm coats, boots, etc., and wait for them to come out the other end. Then you dress them warmly again, move on to the next apartment complex, and repeat the whole thing. Another way to handle it is to paint your kid's face up and not use a costume at all. Of course, to sell your child on this approach, you need to be dealing with a very young and gullible child who believes that if you paint his face up to the level of Tammy Faye Baker, no one could possibly recognize him or her. Of course, the positive side of the cold is that the kids don't want to trick or treat for very long. Once the first 2 bags are filled with cavity-inducing sugar shots, they're relatively content to go home and devour their cash. Oh yes, one word of warning to the adults out there. Don't try to get away with giving toothbrushes out as a healthy alternative to candy unless you're a dentist. The kids certainly don't appreciate the effort. And you can't begin to imagine how hard it is to wash frozen soap off your windows in 20 below weather. Happy Halloween.
Thank you, Elise Patkotak, for your commentary. Although I was a little disappointed, I would have liked to see you dressed up in a fairy princess costume, you know, like when you talked about. Thank you for joining me. I'm Jeannie Green, bringing you native news across the north. Please start gathering Christmas greetings for my hour-long Christmas Eve special. Say hello to your friends and relatives all over the state, Canada, parts of Russia, Greenland, even down south. Thank you once again. I'm Jeannie Green. See you next week.